Ganaganatam Samsaradabo Nalalidalokam Pranaya Karunya Ganaganatam Praptasya Kalyanam Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Praptasya Kalyanam Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditramadya Manasurasena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramarjanado Shri Vigrahara Nityanana Shingaratan Jukta Sabhaktam Sa Jukta Sabhaktam Sa Niyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Jukta Sabhaktam Sa Niyunjatapi Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satvana Truptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satvana Truptan Kridvaiva Trupti Bhajato Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Shradhikama Dabayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Shradhikama Madhurya Leela Pratikshana Swa Dhanalopasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Pratikshana Swa Dhanalopasya Vande Guru Shri Nikunjayuno Rasikeli Siddhai Jajali Vir Yukti Apekshaniya Nikunjay Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Vir Yukti Apekshaniya Tatrati Daksha Ativalavasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Sakshat-haridvena samasta-shri Ruktas-tathava Vyataiva sarve Sakshat-haridvena samasta-shri Into pravodya priya eva tasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Vrindam Asya Vande Guru Shri Isya Prasada Bhagavad Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Bhagavad Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatri Sanyam Vande Guru Shri Charana Ravindam Jayam Tuvam Tasya Yasatri Sanyam Vande Guru Shri Charana Ravindam Vande Guru Shri Charana Ravindam Vande Guru Shri Charana Ravindam Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Saminiti Namine Namah Vishnu Padaya Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pachatarisha Tarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pachatarisha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gora Bhakta Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Tanya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Nama, Krishna Jadavaya Nama, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama, Gopal Govindaram Shrimadhusudanam, Giridhari Gopina Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhattara Guna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasara Guna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram, Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman. Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasingha, Lakshmi Narasingha, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Vishnu Paramahansa Prabhajakacharya, Astuttara Sarasishri Maharaj Divine Grace, अभोचरविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इसकन प्रतिष्ठा विविधि संस्थापकाचार्य पतित पावन वैष्णव शिरोमणि श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री गौरिया गुरु वर्गापति उद्धार की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास गुण सदगोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नामाचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार शिवसरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सचिनंदन स्मरण गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु महावृंदावतार गौर हरि की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमदान हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद निदांग ट्रांसलेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। शिष्य राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ राधा कुंद सम कुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। शिव जबिम वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय। दिलोश शिष्य राधा नील माधव की जय। शिष्य मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय। परम करुण शिष्य गुरु निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर सिंहदेव भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे। All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories to the Assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Guru. You sing, I mean, sing. Yeah? What do you want to sing? You sing it?
I said I wrote to leave after last month.
We like to
I wrote to leave after last month.
Tulasi.
I wrote to leave after last month.
Oh, okay. Sing, sing.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladaladaine.
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 हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः
हिरण्यकशिपूर्वक्षः
शीलटङ्कनकालये
शीलटङ्कनकालये
इतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह
इतो निसिंह परतो निसिंह
यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह
जत जत जामि ततो निसिंह
बहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह
नृसिंह हृदये निसिंह
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये
तव करकमलवरेणकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गाम् दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गाम् केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जय जगदीश हरे
तव कर कमल बरे नाकं अद्भुत सिंह ललिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृंगा केशवदिता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे
केशवधृता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
जय केशवदिता नरहरि रूप जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे जय जगदीश रे
जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव
जय निसिंहरे जय निसिंहरे जय निसिंहरे जय निसिंहरे
जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद
निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल जय श्री श्री भक्तिपद सर्वविघ्नाशन कनि सिंह हरे भगवान की भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय गौरी ब्रह्मानंदे हरि श्री वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रियायै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादिदेवे सतवतै नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रियायै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदेवी सतवतै नमो नमः वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रियायै केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदेवी सतवतै नमो नमः श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय जय जय
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
राधा कृष्ण से
Radha Krishna Seva Pavan Hey Abhilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Hey Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavan Hey Abhilasi
ये तुम्हारा शरण लाए तारा वंश पूर्ण होए
जे तुम्हार शरण थारा वंश पूर्ण
कृपा कोरी करो तारे वृंदावन वासी
तुम्हें कृपा करी करतारे वृंदावन वासी
मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दिया वास
मोरा विलास कुंजे यवा
नयने हेरी बो सदा युगल रूपरासी
अमिनायने देव सधा जुगल रूपरासी
हे निवेदन दारा सुकिरनुगाता करो
ए निवेदन सकीर यनु गता करो
सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी
सेवा यदि कर दिए करो निज दासी
दीन कृष्ण दास कोई न मोरा होय
दीन कृष्ण दास कय हे नामरा
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवसी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये नवसी
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रदर्शन्ति प्रदक्षिण पादे पदे
जानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्मात्यदि कनेसा ताने ताने प्राणाशन्ते प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
जानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्मात्यदिकानि तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
जानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्मात्यदिकानि तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे हरे
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Ittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namo Namaha Vrindai. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavi damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise, may I always fame and love of Shri Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna ki jai. Nayanam galora shudaraya, Vadanam gadagada rudaya gira, Pulakarin chitam bapukada, Tavanama grahane bhavisati, Juga itam nimishena chakrusha pravusaitam, Sunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahinami, Asli shabha padaratam pinashtumam, Adarshanar marma hatam karotuva, Yata tathava viradatulam patu, Mat pranatastu saivana Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kestakam ki jai. Chaitanya Namini Gaura Tvishe. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I'm fallen this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And only the hairs on my body stand on end at the recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling your separation, I consider that moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Shri Shikshastakam ki jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheme devotees who dedicate their life to the propagation of the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to, independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma. 9. To instruct the fatherless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even of understanding so many instructions in this matter.
It is also an offense to be an attentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all Vaishnavas, Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmadyasya Yato Nivyad Itaratas Charteswa Vigyaswarat. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuryaha. Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mesha. Tam Lasvena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord Sri Krishna, O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O my Lord Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
Okay. O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O my Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested
He
universes.
is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It's he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
The original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
The water is in the fire, land is in the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universes,
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature,
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
Dharma
truth.
projita kaitravudra,
Dharma Prajita Kaitavutra,
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
Paramo Nirmasaranam
vedyam vastavamatra vastu,
Vedyam Vastavamastravasti,
shivadam tapa trayon mulanam.
Shivadam Tapo Trayamulanam,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mamune Krite,
Kim va parir Ishvaraha,
Kim Va Paririshvara,
Sadyo Hridaya Varudyate Tra,
Sadyurudya Varudyati,
Krite Bihi Sususubhistakshanat.
Kritibhi Shushubhistat Kanat,
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Puran propounds the high
which
truth,
is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees that are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
It is beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva's maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hear the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of knowledge,
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpatoror galitam phalam,
sukamukad amrita dravya samyatam,
sukamakadam rita travasam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Vivata Bhagavatam rasamalayam,
more aho raska bhuvibhavakaha.
Mora horasika bhuvi bhavuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic
It
literatures.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectar and juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarine juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
I know.
Oh, it's a
Hold your horses. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna
Sramvatam Swakata Krishna
Punya Shravana Kirtana
Punya Shravana Kirtana
Hiryantaksto Hi Bhadrani
Hiryankasuya Bhadani
Vidunoti Sruhitsatam.
Vidunati Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literature,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly from the Bhagavad,
is itself righteous activity.
is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And from who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is everyone's heart.
acts as a best wishing friend,
Acts as the best wishing,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee who is constantly engaged in hearing from him.
Nasta presu bhadresu
Nasta Praishwa Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Seva
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama Sloke
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Nasti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, it would naturally develop his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayaschaye
sheta etayaranavidam
Chita Itaranavidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sattve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional
one becomes
service,
freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and average are diminished.
Evam prasanna manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva
mukta
Vijnanam
sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Hidyate Hridaya Granthis
chidyante sarvasamsaya
Chidyante Sarva Samshaya
siyante chasya karmandi
Chiyante Satyakarma
justa evatmanishvare.
Drusta Evadmaneshwari.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material affection
Thus, Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of the material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at one to the stage of assumption among
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality, Godhead.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees, Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 42. Navai nirbir naradeva parakyam
Save nripir naradevam parakyam.
You have what was the first word that you said?
Navai.
Oh, okay. Samatumarhas avipakshva budhe
Sama tumara shavipakva buddhi.
yatejasa durvisahena gupta
Yatejasa durvishayena gupta.
vindanti badrani akuto baya praja.
Vindanti Bhadranya Kuto Bhaya Praja.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Oh my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best amongst human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable prowess. We'll go on to the next verse. Alakshamane naradeva namni
Alakshamane Naradeva Namni
ratangapana ayam angaloka
Ratangapana Vayam Angaloka
tadahi chora pachuro vinankshyati
Tadai Chora Prachuro Vinancheti
arakshamano vivarutavat kshanat.
Arakshamano Vivrutavakyanat.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime. And when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves, who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, the monarchical regime represents the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. The king is said to be representative of the absolute personality of Godhead because he is trained to acquire the qualities of God to protect the living beings. The Battle of Kurukshetra was planned by the Lord to establish the real representative of the Lord, Maharaj Yudhishthira, an ideal king, thoroughly trained by culture and devotional service with the martial spirit, makes a perfect king. So martial means military. Right? Makes a perfect king. Such a personal monarchy is far better than the so-called democracy of no training and responsibility. The thieves and rogues of modern democracy seek election by misrepresentation of votes. And the successful rogues and thieves devour the mass of people. One trained monarch is far better than hundreds of useless ministerial rogues. And it is hinted herein that by abolition of a monarchical regime like that of Maharaj Pariksit, the mass of people become open to many attacks of the age of Kali. They are never happy in an overly advertised form of democracy. The result of such a kingless administration is described in the following verses. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is a serious indictment of modern democracy, or as we said yesterday, demon crazy, as Prabhupada calls it. And we can see the beginning of this downward spiral to nonsense democracy began with Shringi, who was immature, who had immature intelligence, and thus no proper knowledge of who the king was. So yesterday a question was asked, if a normal person put a dead snake, around the neck of Samika Rishi, would that be excused as not being significant? No. It would be a serious offense. So why is it not a serious offense not considered a serious offense by Samika Rishi himself. Well, that's the whole purpose of the 17th and 18th chapters that we're reading here. Because in the 17th chapter, it becomes perfectly clear that Maharaj Parikshit is an ideal king. What is an ideal king? Well, Prabhupada repeats it. An ideal king thoroughly trained by culture and devotional service with the martial spirit makes a perfect king. Such a personal monarchy is far better than a so-called democracy of no training and responsibility. So he is thoroughly trained by culture. What is that culture? The culture of Krishna consciousness, right? And also he has the martial or military spirit. What is a military spirit? He must lead his soldiers into battle. And if he gets killed, the war is over. And he should not come back from the battle without some injury. Because if he actually is in the front line leading the soldiers, he's going to be injured for sure. But it's a sign of his martial spirit. His martial spirit is, in every battle, either he's going to win the battle or he's going to die. But he's not going to come back like a wimp. Or he's not going to be a wimp and not go to the battle. See? So the whole purpose of the Battle of Kurukshetra was planned by the Lord to establish the real representative of the Lord, Maharaj Yudhishthira. And now, this whole episode with the personality of Kali torturing Mother Earth and Dharma, the bull, was to show that Maharaj Parikshit was an ideal king. And therefore, what Shringi did was really wrong. Even his father admitted that it was wrong. And it was a sign of an immature intellect, and Shringi was taken advantage of by the personality of Kali, who established his authority by seizing the mind of this inexperienced young boy, making him think that he should be the next incarnation of God on the earth, and that he had a perfect right to judge and punish Maharaj Parikshit without getting any advice from his father or anyone else. So the desire, when one is puffed up with power, but not trained with proper culture of Krishna consciousness, they become a nuisance in society rather than an asset. And by the degradation of the monarchical system, just to give you an idea, they still have a king and queen in England and in the Netherlands, and I think some of the Scandinavian countries also. So in England, when the previous king or queen dies, the coronation of the next king or queen is a religious ritual activity, a religious ritual, where the next king or queen is blessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and there's a whole, and it's done in the church, Westminster. Is it Westminster? Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah, and it's very spiritual and royal, or at least it looks spiritual. So, and before a person becomes king or queen, they have to be trained. to take that position in England. So a male member of the family who's going to become, the royal family is going to become king, he has to be trained militarily. He has to actually go to war if there's a war. And in a sense, it's not exactly the same as Maharaj Pariksha, but in a sense lead the soldiers into the war. So this training is very important. We're going to talk about that now. This is explained in depth in Madhya Lila, Madhya Lila chapter 22. And it's amazing what Prabhupada says. Well, Lord Chaitanya spent several months instructing Rupa Goswami and then separately Sanatana Goswami in Krishna consciousness. So in Madhya 22, he's instructing Sanatana Goswami. So there's a very interesting verse. He says, there are two kinds of devotees. Those who are fully satiated and free from all material desires, and those who are fully surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord. Their qualities are one and the same, but those who are fully surrendered to Krishna's lotus feet are qualified with another transcendental quality, Atma Samarpana, full surrender without reservation. So, what does he mean here? I mean, they both have the same qualities, but the one who's fully surrendered to Krishna's lotus feet has one extra transcendental quality, Atma Samarpana, full surrender without reservation. That is, that in that fully surrendered devotee, there's not 1 second wasted. Every second is used in Krishna consciousness. Whereas in the other one, where it's free from all material desires, there may be, not sure, but there may be some periods where the person is not completely, like say, surrendered, not completely thinking of Krishna and engaged in love and devotion to the Lord. So that's a very interesting point. And then another interesting point Prabhupada makes, when Lord Chaitanya is instructing Sanatana Goswami about proper renunciation according to a particular situation, and also the Lord forbids dry renunciation and speculative knowledge in all respects. So, Prabhupada writes, this is the technique for understanding Shuska Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. In Bhagavad Gita 6:17 it is said, Yukta Hara Viharasya Yukta Chetasya Karmana Yukta Swapna Vabodhasya Yoga Bhavati Dukkha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. To broadcast the cult of Krishna consciousness, one has to learn the possibility of renunciation in terms of country, time, and candidate. A candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about renunciation of material existence. But one would teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. The teacher, Acharya, has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyam agraha. That is, he should not try to perform the impossible. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. There may be a little change here and there as far as Yukta Vairagya, proper renunciation, is concerned. Dry renunciation is forbidden by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we have also learned this from our spiritual master. His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Goswami Maharaja. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration, and not the outward paraphernalia. Sanatana Goswami wrote his Vaishnava Smriti, Hari Bhakti Vilasa, which was specifically meant for India. In those days, India was more or less following the principle of Smarta Vidhi. Sri Sanatana Goswami had to keep pace with this, and his Hari Bhakti Vilasa was compiled with this in mind. According to Smarta Brahmanas, a person not born in a Brahmana family could not be elevated to the position of a Brahmana. Sanatana Goswami, however, says in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa 2.12 that anyone can be elevated to the position of a Brahmana by the process of initiation. Yata kanchanatam yati kam syam rasa vidanata tata diksha vidanena dvijatam jayate nrinam. As bell metal is turned to gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, so one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. There is a difference between the Smarta process and the Goswami process. According to the Smarta process, one cannot be accepted as a Brahmana unless he's born in a Brahmana family. According to the Goswami process, the Hari Bhakti Vilasa, and the Narada Pancharatra, anyone can be a Brahmana if he is properly initiated by a bona fide spiritual master. This is also the verdict of Sukadeva Goswami in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.4.18. So here you see there's a big difference between the Smarta Brahmin and the Goswami Brahmins. Now, in South India, almost everybody's a Smarta Brahmin, whether they're Brahmins in the Shiva Sampradaya or Brahmins in Shiva Vaishnava Sampradayas, or at least most in the Sri Vaishnava, all in Shiva Sampradaya, right? And most in the Sri Vaishnava. I'm not going to say all, but most, or many. So, here Prabhupada gives three references of the Goswami Sampradaya, or Goswami process. That is, there is one becomes Brahmana by initiation. Yeah. So Sanatana Goswami makes that point and deviates from, or distances himself from the Smarta, although the rest of his Hari Bhakti Vyasa is mostly Smarta-like principles or rituals. But that major point is different. And then also in the Narada Pancharatra also says that anyone who is properly trained can become a Brahmana. And then Sukadeva Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Kirata Hinandra Pulinda Pulkasa Abhira Samba Yavana Kasadaya Yene Chapapa Yad Apastrayasraya Sudyanti Tasmai Prabhavishna Nama. Kiratas, Hundas, Andras, Pulindras, Pulkasas, Abhiras, Sambas, Yavanas, and members of the Kasa races, and even others who are addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord due to his being the supreme power, meaning Lord Krishna, his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So Prabhupada continues, he says, a Vaishnava is immediately purified, provided he follows the rules and regulations of his bona fide spiritual master. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. So what does he mean there? Well, we see that ISKCON in India does not allow women to do deity worship on the altar. They can do back service, but not directly on the altar. And we see that oftentimes women may not be allowed to live in the ashrams where there are men. And there are other similar types of things. Like, for example, there's a big controversy. The United States wants the United States GBCs want women to become gurus. And the Indian GBCs absolutely refuse. You see, so there are differences in rules, slight differences, not major differences, but there are slight differences in because of, what is it called, Kala Patra something, Adesa, Kala Patra Desa, that is time, place, and candidate, or the person, right? So, Prabhupada says, a Vaishnava is immediately purified provided he or she follows the rules and regulations of his bona fide spiritual master. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. Okay, so here, women are allowed on the altar to do direct service to the deities. And women are given in ISKCON the Upanayanam, or the Brahman initiation. And they're given the Gayatri Mantra. That's never done in India, right? Although they do it in the ISKCON temples. So, you know, there's some things they don't do and some things they do. So Prabhupada is making a point here that it is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. Simply imitating without effect is called niyamagraha. Not following the regulative principles, but instead living extravagantly, is also called niyamagraha. So, in other words, if you just follow the regulative principles but don't make spiritual advancement, that's niyamagraha. Or if you don't follow, or if you follow the regulative principles but you live extravagantly, that's also not really following. Not following the regulative principles, but instead living not following the regulative principles and living extravagantly as a Vaishnava, let's say, is also called niyamagraha. So in other words, following but not making any spiritual advancement, or not following but living and living extravagantly, both are niyamagraha. So what does that mean? Agraha means eagerness, and niyama means regulative principles. The word agraha means not to accept. So agraha with a long A and agraha with a short A have two different meanings. Agraha means eagerness, and agraha means not to accept. We should not follow regulative principles without an effect, nor should we fail to accept the regulative principles. What is required is a special technique according to country, time, and candidate. Without this, so what is this special technique? This is a surprising statement by Prabhupada. Without the sanction of the spiritual master, we should not try to imitate. This principle is recommended here. Shuska Vairagya Jnana Sabha Nisedila. This is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's liberal demonstration of the bhakti cult. He's saying liberal demonstration of the bhakti cult. We should not introduce anything whimsically without the sanction of the bona fide spiritual master. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura comments on these points by quoting two verses by Sri Rupa Goswami from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.255 and 256. Well, just a side statement here. I was talking to someone, and they told me about one ISKCON guru who insists that initiation, that his followers follow 3 regulative principles. Now, why is that? Because, this is in the United States, he apparently knows that they're not going to follow no illicit sex. So he doesn't force them to promise that. Now, I don't, I'm not supporting that, but just to let you know how things happen, right? And he probably has read this purport, and he thinks that he can make that, but he cannot make that determination. He doesn't have the authority to make that determination. So, what is required is a special technique according to country, time, and candidate. Without the sanction of the spiritual master, we should not try to imitate. This principle is recommended here. Sukska Vairagya Jnana Sabha Nisedila. This is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's liberal demonstration of the bhakti cult. We should not introduce anything whimsically without sanction of the bona fide spiritual master. In this connection, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments on these points by quoting 2 verses by Sri Rupa Goswami. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upaunjitaha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagyam uchyate. Papa chikitaya buddhya harisambandhu vastanam. Mumukshubi parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. And the quote, to preach the bhakti cult, one should seriously consider these verses. Okay, so what do these verses say? Let's go over it again. A person who is not attached to anything material, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna. That means he's not attached to anything material, but he's attached to serving Krishna properly and with love and devotion. One is rightly situated above possessiveness because he's not going to do anything for his own aggrandizement, his own accumulation of wealth. He's not interested in that. But he'll do everything to offer Krishna whatever is suitable for the Lord. And there's no limit to it. However, on the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna. Now, this is the case of the Mayavadis. They say, neti, neti, neti. Not this, not that. And they just want to meditate on the Brahman. So they don't really engage in devotional service. So one who rejects everything without knowledge of his relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. Therefore, to preach the bhakti cult, one should seriously consider these verses. So Arjuna was not willing to fight. And that was in, let's say, incomplete renunciation. Because Krishna was asking him to fight. So the number one devotee has no material attachments, but at the same time accepts everything in relationship to Krishna. Right? Okay, so this is a very interesting point, because if we want to understand Krishna consciousness, we have to understand these things. So then in Antya Lila chapter 1, we read about the dog, right, yesterday, and Shivananda Sena. So this verse says, "The next day no one saw the dog, for it had obtained its spiritual body and departed for Vaikuntha, the spiritual kingdom." In the purport, I'm going to read this again because it's very significant. This is the result of sadhu sangha, or associating with genuine sadhus. Consequent association with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and promotion back home, back to Godhead. So, in other words, associating with devotees of Lord Chaitanya and with Lord and hearing about the Lord and following his process, and now we're going to hear what that is, will promote someone back home, back to Godhead. This result is possible even for a dog by the mercy of the Vaishnava. Therefore, everyone in the human form of life should be induced to associate with devotees. In other words, they should be convinced that association with devotees is absolutely necessary for making spiritual advancement. By rendering a little service, even by eating prasadam, what to speak of chanting and dancing, everyone can be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka. It is therefore requested that all our devotees in the ISKCON community become pure Vaishnavas, so that by their mercy all the people of the world will be transferred to Vaikuntha Loka, even without their knowledge. Everyone should be given a chance to take prasadam and thus be induced to chant the holy names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, and also dance in ecstasy. By these three processes, although performed without knowledge or education, even an animal went back to Godhead. It's amazing, right? Now, one last point I want to make, and that is the 64 qualities, the 64 obligations of a devotee are important. And this is explained in chapter 22 also. And I'm going to go over this chapter very carefully in the next couple days or weeks. But just want to read one important point, and that is that okay, one second. Okay. It says that there are 26 qualities of a devotee. All right. I'm not going to go over it right now, but in that same section it says that it is the verdict of all Shastras and great personalities that service to a pure devotee is the path of liberation. By contrast, association with materialistic people who are attached to material enjoyment and sense gratification is the path of darkness. Those who are actually devotees are broad-minded, equal to everyone, and very peaceful. They never become angry, and they are friendly to all living entities. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. O my Lord, O infallible Supreme Person, when a person wandering throughout the universes becomes eligible for liberation from material existence, he gets an opportunity to associate with devotees. When he associates with devotees, his attraction for you is awakened. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal of the topmost devotees, and the Lord of the universe. This is a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 51st chapter, 53rd verse. So, what is the most important thing for us is association with genuine devotees. That's what will keep us in devotional service. And when we separate ourselves somewhat, for whatever reason, just like Shringi, he in a sense separated himself from his father, Samika Rishi, by not taking his advice before making that big decision. Then we make big mistakes in our life. Right. So the root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. And the most advanced devotee is Srila Prabhupada. That's why every day we're reading his purports and explanations to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Without that, we are like a boat without a rudder, just floating around, being tossed back and forth by the waves of the ocean and not really going anywhere specifically, just getting more and more confused. So therefore, simply read, like we said, simply reading the verses is good, but it's not enough, because we'll have the tendency to speculate to try and understand what the verse means. But if we read the verse and the purport by Srila Prabhupada, then we have a good chance of understanding. And even better than that is to hear it spoken by genuine devotees, where you have a chance to ask questions and get the answers, and those answers have to be shastrically verified and validated, not simply opinions. Okay, we'll stop there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions, comments, etc.? What I just read?
Yeah.
Just now?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, I just read from Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 82, 83, and 84.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, you mentioned about that the Prabhupada has given a message that based on the time, place, and person, right?
Yeah.
So
Candidate,
the message
yeah.
has to be different. So
No, it doesn't have to be. But he said can be different in India or in the West.
So I try to understand, Maharaj, like why, if the message, the rules are rules, the spiritual rules should be same for
The
everyone.
rules are the same. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. That's the same. But certain practices may be adjusted according to time, place, and the people.
And that adjustment is for to like based on the culture of the particular place, or why it has to be adjusted?
Well, I'll give you a practical example. I was on a morning walk with Prabhupada. And there was Shyam Sundar and another devotee. And as we were walking, Prabhupada stopped and he said, Shyam Sundar, why are all the grahastas in Maya? And like Shyam Sundar didn't say anything. He stayed quiet, you know. And then Prabhupada sort of smiled and said, yes, that is their position. He said, when I first came to America, my plan was to make an army of sannyasis. But then I saw it's not possible. So then I thought, let them get married. Husband gives wife one son. Wife takes the son, goes to Vrindavan, and husband takes sannyas. And I was like, sort of looked at Shyam Sundar. He's like horrified. And then Prabhupada smiled and said, but that is not possible. Therefore, let them chant Hare Krishna. You see? So he came to America and he saw the situation, it's 1960s, in the middle of the hippie revolution and sexual liberation, all that nonsense, and LSD and drugs and rioting and the Vietnam War. He said certain things are not possible here. So he made some adjustments. He didn't say, well, you only have to follow 3 of the regulative principles, not 4. He didn't say that, right? He didn't compromise on the regulative principles, but he did give some consideration for women, because women in America want some kind of equality with men. So Prabhupada permitted them to take Brahmin initiation, to go on the altar, to worship the deities, but it's not allowed in India. You go to India, do you see any women on the altar?
No.
Not one. They're not allowed to come near it, right? And this whole thing about women becoming gurus, the Indian GBCs are completely against it. Right? So there are certain things, but not the fundamental rules and regulations. There's certain things according to time and place and candidate.
Yeah.
Speaking in microphone.
No, I just want to emphasize what you said. It was correct that the principles are principles, but practices are...
Hold the microphone close. We want to hear every word you say. Not only we, but people listening.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, the principles are there, should be always followed, but the practices are something different. Practices according to time, place, circumstance, you can adjust. The principle is still the same.
Not you or me can adjust.
Yeah.
It's only the acharya.
I heard Prabhupada say that,
Yeah.
There's difference. The principle, he said, actually was actually in conversation about regarding time, place, and circumstances. He clearly mentioned this. He said nothing can be changed. The truth is the truth. The principle is eternal. Principle of devotional service is eternal. But adjustment can be made by expert,
Acharyas.
preacher, you say that. Acharya preacher, something like that. So, yeah, correct.
Haripol.
But Maharaj, then, so that probably leads to a different interpretation over a period of time. So, for example, even India, forget about the different country, in India itself, people started following because based on the different time, place, some acharyas came and they give different message based on the these 3 factors: time, place,
do you have any
and person.
examples of what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, I mean, even the
Are
say
you saying
Bhagwan.
that Sankaracharya gave different instructions than Ramanujacharya or Ramanujacharya
these
gave
are one of
different
the examples.
instructions than Sankaracharya?
So Bhagwan Buddha came and he gave some different message.
Who?
Buddha.
Buddha.
Yeah. Then after that we have like maybe Shankaracharya is totally different philosophy, but he came and he gave his message and in his time frame at the same, because there was the very dominant at that particular time. Nobody was like very same at the same level, so that message got spread, right? If when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, so Chaitanya Prabhu, there was nobody is equal to him like that time. So when Shankaracharya came, nobody was like as par with him. What can give message different than what he is given. So, but that's one thing. But again, if we come back to that point, like time, place, and person, so it might be that requirement of that time or place. Is that
Okay. Well, you see, when you talk about Sankaracharya, he's actually, incarnation of Lord Shiva, who's a devotee, and he's considered Vaishnavananam Yata Sambhu, the greatest devotee of Krishna. So he basically tricked the Buddhists to give up their rejection of the Vedas and accept the Vedas. But to do that, he gave a Buddhist-like interpretation of the Vedas, so it would be easy for them. But it reestablished the authority of the Vedas. But his final instructions were that give up all word jugglery, because he engaged himself in word jugglery, right, to do this. He said, just give it up and just surrender to Govinda or Krishna, chant the holy name, right? And so he's actually a devotee, but he had to make this shift from Buddhism back to Vedic Shastra, right? So if you look at him, if you read what Prabhupada says about Sankaracharya, you understand that he's actually a devotee and he's bona fide acharya. Even though he was teaching Mayavad philosophy, but actually, ultimately, he was advocating pure Krishna consciousness. So that's different than, well, Buddha also, he had to stop what he considered was ruining Vedic Dharma because of the fallen condition of the Brahmanas, who were doing animal sacrifices, which are not allowed in Kali Yuga. And when the animal died, they were distributing the flesh as prasadam. So actually, they were advocating meat eating in the name of Vedas. So he had to stop that. And see, when people make money from something, it's very hard to get them to stop. So therefore, he rejected the Vedas. But he taught the principles of the Vedas, such as nonviolence, such as renunciation, and so forth. And he was able to get the Buddhists to follow him. But he's an incarnation of Krishna, you see. And then Sankaracharya comes, and then he pushes up a couple steps from rejecting the Vedas to accepting the Vedas, but with a Buddhist-like interpretation. And then Ramanujacharya comes and defeats that interpretation and gives the right understanding. And then Madhvacharya supports it even more. And then Lord Chaitanya is the most liberal because he wants to eliminate all misconceptions or all non-bona fide practices and traditions like the Smarta tradition, all that. And I said, anybody can be trained in Krishna consciousness. It's nothing new. Narada Muni said it also, and Sukadeva Goswami said it also, right? It's nothing new. And even in the Puranas, there's history of Satyakama, the low-born boy who was accepted by Gautam Muni as a disciple, even though he didn't even know what his gotra was, right? But because he told the truth, he was accepted and trained to be a devotee. So we see there was, as when Kali Yuga started, there was a deviation for about 2,500 years. Then Buddha comes and starts to shift back to the bona fide thing, and then Ramanuja comes, and then Madhvacharya comes, and then Lord Chaitanya, he completely, opens up the treasure chest of pure love of God for everybody. Right? So you have to read carefully. All this is explained in Bhagavatam and especially Chaitanya Charitamrita. And now you have Prabhupada who comes and he's explaining that there could be some minor differences due to time, place, and people that the Acharya can make. Some minor things, not the main rules and regulations, but some minor things, just to make it a little more easier for the people to follow. In the low, because the farther west you go, the more fallen people are. See? So, therefore, we have to carefully read and discuss these things. so we understand what actually happened and what's going on now and why. And you see, it's very pertinent because right now there's this big thing that's been going on for the last, 10 years. Should women be allowed in ISKCON to become Diksha gurus? And in India, they're saying no, and America is saying yes. Of course, I offered a solution to the whole thing, but nobody listens to me. In last year's GBC meeting, I said, "Wait a minute. There's a great opportunity now that we can correct something that has been not properly followed for a long time, and that is to make everyone understand that Siksha and Diksha gurus are equal, not theoretically, but practically. And if you do this, then women can become Siksha gurus and men also, because there are a lot of qualified Siksha gurus in this movement, but they're not recognized officially, right? So they should be recognized officially just like they recognize Diksha gurus. They should also be, and women could become Siksha gurus. They don't give initiation, but they're still acting like a guru.
Yeah.
And that way we wouldn't break any tradition or rules, but yet it's following in the liberal tradition of Lord Chaitanya without breaking the rules. Of course, nobody listens to me, so that's another problem. And that would avoid all this fighting, but they don't want to do that. So anyway, they like to fight. Okay. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.